of the larger world, it must move away from the reduction of literacy to a static series of technical skills or risk fostering a population of functional illiterates. In short, school literacy needs to be expanded to reflect the semiotic systems that young people use. Schools that promote a linguistic view of literacy and a linear view of reading fail to connect the kinds of literacy required in the school with the out-of-school worlds of most industry and society in the 21st century with educational institutions and curriculum. In this course, we have all learned and discovered the tremendous potential that emerging technologies have to help build these skills while staying true to theories of educational pioneers. In this presentation, we set out to focus on a specific aspect of emerging technologies, the use of multimodal text and multimodal composition in literacy education. Our consensus is that while there are significant positives to be gained by the use of such technology, there are significant challenges and risks that warrant attention and careful consideration of design and application. Let's first look at the positive potential of multimodal text and then consider the challenges that are presented. Next slide.
All right, as we go further in our research of 21st century skills, we must ask the question, what are multimodal texts? Ansley and Bull present as assistance to teachers in the exploration of multimodal texts. Within this of research, they provide a definition of literacy for explanation and clarification of purpose. Quoting, in the 21st century, the definition of literacy has expanded to refer to a flexible, sustainable command of a set of capabilities in the use and production of traditional texts and new communication technologies using spoken language, print, and multimedia, end quote. The aim of increased proficiency among educators is to provide students the ability to understand, interpret, reflect on, and create spoken, written, and multimodal text throughout a variety of learning environments. Next slide, please. There are 5 semiotic systems in total. Linguistics, being the characteristics such as vocabulary, generic structure, and the grammar of oral and written language. Visual, comprising aspects such as color, vectors, and viewpoint in still and moving images. Audio, encompassing features such as volume, pitch, and rhythm of music and sound effects. Gestural, containing structures such as movement, speed, and stillness in facial expression and body language. Spatial, the last of that, involving traits such as a proximity, direction, position of layout, and organization of objects in space. Examples of multimodal text are a picture book, in which the text and visual elements are arranged to contribute to a complete work or process, I should say. A web page in which elements such as a sound effect, oral language, written language, music, still, or moving images are combined. And then lastly, a living concert in which gesture, music, and space are the main elements. Next slide, please. Helping teachers support students' facility with multimodal text is imperative. Number one, having a knowledge and understanding about the reading and writing multimodal texts that are delivered in different ways, possibly through paper, live, and digital electronics. 2, the knowledge of the 5 semiotic systems of which a multimodal text can be composed. The third one, meta-language that facilitates the analysis, discussion, and understanding of how multimodal text can work. Explicit pedagogies that make the process of reading and writing multimodal text transparent. And then the last, ensure that the educational environment has a balanced, school-wide approach to the teaching of the multimodal texts. Next slide, please.
Since the Industrial Revolution, we have conceived of the brain as a fixed structure. We have conceived of the brain as a machine. With the development of the digital computer, the machine metaphor was extended so that by the late 20th century, we began to talk about our brain as hardwired. But now in the 21st century, neuroscientists suggest that our brain is plastic. The brain adapts through the way we live and through the tools we use. The more we use a tool, the more our brain adapts to its form and function. Moreover, the space our brain mapped for the skills we once used is remapped for the skills we now use. Next slide, please. We now live much of our lives connected to the internet. It is not only a powerful tool, it is also a habit of mind, a form and a way of life. And as Nicholas Carr argues, we, quote, tend to use the net regularly, even obsessively. It delivers precisely the kind of sensory and cognitive stimuli, repetitive, intensive, interactive, addictive, that have been shown to result in strong and rapid alterations in brain circuits and functions, close quote. Next slide, please. Earlier in the semester, we read about Jean Piaget's constructivism. He posited 4 stages of adaptation and organization: assimilation, accommodation, equilibration, and schemata. Human beings are confronted by external stimuli that we assimilate into our existing mental schemata, essentially hardwired pigeonholes through which we structure knowledge. Prior to new stimuli being assimilated and accommodated, human beings find themselves in a state of disequilibrium. We accommodate new stimuli by constructing new schemata or by reconfiguring existing ones. Piaget believed that all human beings are hardwired in their drive to achieve equilibrium. This hardwired drive he called equilibration. Next slide. Although we no longer understand our brains as hardwired, Carr would likely argue that we human beings are more often in a state of disequilibrium now that our brains have adapted to the new medium of the internet. He provides much support for this claim. For example, educational psychologist John Sweller's studies of the relationship between working memory and long-term memory indicate that the way our minds process information when we surf the web has a strong effect on the depth of our understanding. Quote, the depth of our intelligence hinges on our ability to transfer information from the working memory to long-term memory and weave it into conceptual schemas. The information flowing into our working memory at any given moment is called our cognitive load. When the load exceeds our mind's ability to store and process the information, we're unable to retain the information or to draw connections with the information already stored in our long-term memory. We cannot translate the new information into schema. Our ability to learn suffers and our understanding remains shallow. Close quote. Next slide. In other words, cognitive overload leads to decreased comprehension and retention. Overall, our intensive use of the net increases our capacity to access and to some degree to process a breadth of information. But this increase diminishes our capacity for in-depth understanding and critical thinking. Carr claims, quote, when we go online, we enter an environment that promotes cursory reading, hurried and distracted thinking, and superficial learning, close quote. Next slide. In writing about the uses of new technology in schools, Langsure and Noble have suggested, quote, it does not follow from the fact that so-called new technologies are being used in literacy education that new literacies are being engaged with. Still less does it imply that learners are developing, critiquing, analyzing, or even becoming technically proficient with new literacies, close quote. If it's true that time spent surfing the web distracts from digital natives' ability to sustain attention and to develop significant cognitive skills, then there are serious ramifications for what we think of as literacy. Ken Pugh, a cognitive neuroscientist at Yale, argues that reading a book and taking the time to ruminate and make inferences and engage the imagination is more cognitively enriching, without doubt, than the short little bits that you might get if you're into the 30-second digital mode. As a digital immigrant myself, but one who works with natives every day, I concur with Pugh's observations. Many students lack the skills and habits of mind to attend closely to one text and sustain a logical argument for any significant period of time. Such skills and habits are necessary to understand so much of what has been written prior to the digital age. Still others dismiss these concerns. Young people, quote, aren't so troubled as some of us older folks are by reading that doesn't go on a line, said Rand J. Spiro, professor of educational psychology at Michigan State, who is studying reading practices on the internet. That's a good thing because the world doesn't go on a line, and the world isn't organized into separate compartments of chapters, close quote. Spiro's argument is not one that compels me. It is, after all, through the processes of reading and analyzing and interpreting what William James called the blooming, buzzing confusion, that we order it, we understand it, and there is no reason whatsoever to think that the language we use to examine the world should have the same structure of that which is being examined. Just because the world is not linear doesn't mean our reading practices ought not to be. Next slide, please.
Great. As we conclude our presentation, it is essential that we do not overlook the fact that those instructing require continuous professional development. Although our focus has been with educators, notwithstanding, there are many other professions that require similar learning aspects. In commencing the professional learning process, it is important to clarify the following. The training of educators to become more comfortable in the usage and the understanding of a variety of multimodal tools. Increasing the educator's ability to use more complex media resources as their knowledge and competence increases. The awareness that the multimodal medias used possess text, using audio, gestural, visual, linguistics, and spatial semiotic skills. Necessary support for educators through the professional learning, through discussion and knowledge of what works and what clearly does not. Exchange of ideas between educators regarding challenges encountered and support for each area of need when necessary. This makes the knowledge more transparent and useful to the learner and the educator providing the learning. Please note our references and images sources for more information. Thank you. That concludes our presentation.